good.
Nice to meet
Yeah.
you.
Nice to meet you too.
Where are you coming out of?
So I'm in Falls Church, Virginia, about 20 minutes outside of DC.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, right in the middle of the map.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been up there before. I was actually just thinking about that yesterday. Um, I used to work for a YMCA and I took one of the kids, we got a technology grant from AT&T and T, and I took him up there and I loved it. I love the rail system. I love seeing all that history. It's wild when you see it firsthand.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, like so many places, we take it for granted because we're so close.
Yeah.
But I'm often going down to a meeting and just, if I get stopped at a light by the Washington Monument, I just take a minute and try to appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the cradle of our history. So it's pretty cool to see for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
indeed.
so before we get into your life and your professional career and what makes you who you are, COVID was quite a thing for all of us. It did its own thing on each of us. How did you get through it, and how has it changed the way that you do business now?
Yeah, such a great question. It's something I actually think about like the before times and the after times quite a bit. So when COVID hit, my children were let's see, fifth, third, and kindergarten, something
Wow.
like that, little. Um, and I remember like a week into it when they canceled school for 4 weeks. Initially, they just said no school for 4 weeks. And I remember calling my dad and just breaking into tears, just saying, Dad, they've canceled school for 4 weeks. What am I
Mm,
going to do?
mm,
Not, of course, realizing that we were just at the beginning of, a year and a half of disruption. So I think for us, you know, the biggest challenge was having the kids home and trying to balance school and working full time, and feeling like failing, that I was failing kind of like on all fronts, even though we were really trying. The hardest was watching my son, being a kindergartner who just loved school. He loved his teachers, he loved his friends, and he just completely broke down. He didn't have the stamina to be on Zoom and was just felt isolated. And so it was really hard for him. And that was hard to watch. I what ended up happening, I kind of switched from kind of a full-time role at work to being more of an hourly employee to get a little bit more flexibility. And then we just did our best. But I think on the positive side, we had just tons of time together as a family.
yeah.
Actually did a little bit of traveling, when we could, when it was, and so I think we made the best of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was hard.
Yeah, it was. I know. My son, he's 18 now, but he has special needs. He's on the spectrum. And the two things that he loves the most is school and baseball. And that all happened in March. Yeah. I had a friend that lived north of me about 2 months prior that was like, we've already gotten a letter saying that if tech devices go home, get ready. And I was in such denial. I was like, I just didn't even, I was like, I'm out. I'm not even going down that mental road. Like I'm sorry, dude, not gonna do it. And then of course the everything unfolded the way it did for all of us. And I
Right.
work in a school district by day. I do IT work, and I remember at one point when the kids kind of started coming back, the kindergartners came in with masks on, and a teacher just kind of stopped and looked at me and said, they don't know anything different than this. And I was just like,
Right.
wow, like, we
Right.
have decades of all of this baggage and experience and wisdom, hopefully, and we can kind of motor through it. That's when age comes in, when something bad or big like that happens. But when you're a kid and that's your reality, they don't know anything different. We can say,
Yeah.
hey, yeah, I remember in the 80s and we could do this and we could run around and have a good time and there weren't all these restrictions. But this is a whole different ball game when you have a child that's so young on this planet. You're like, they don't know any different.
Right. Right. Yeah. No,
Wow.
that is so true.
Oh my. So let's get into what you do in your capacity of helping people be better leaders. And I'm going to put you in front of a third grade classroom at a career day. And one of the kids looks up at you and says, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that child?
Oh my gosh. Well, And as we know, it's sometimes very difficult to explain what we do to kids that really don't have a bit like a office or a business context. So what I try to tell my kids is, one, I work a lot on my computer, but I also work a lot directly one-on-one with people and with groups. I'm sort of like a teacher, but for adults.
Yeah.
And what I focus on is having them feel more confident and more capable of leading groups. So that's how I
Yeah.
try to explain to my kids, and they still kind of give me like, okay,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. 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 No,
yeah.
that makes sense. So what did you want to be when you were young in the third grade, so to speak? What did you want to grow up and become?
Yeah, well, we at the time were in Phoenix, Arizona,
Okay.
so kind of out in the desert, and on the weekends we would, go out and see like dinosaur digs and stuff like that. So I thought it was going to be like a paleontologist, some
Hmm.
kind of something in the sciences. But as I grew up, I kind of went a little bit more towards law. Like going into college, I thought, well, maybe I would do something with law. Coming out of college, uh, I was going to take a break, and so I got a job, and I realized I love working. I like working so much better than being in school. And so really my all my professional growth since then has really been more on the job, taking courses kind of here and there, but really never got back in any serious way to grad school, because I just found I learned so much by doing.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was just thinking, I've been in Kansas City landlocked for my whole life. And it's interesting because people think when you live in Arizona that it's hot all the time, but desert living's weird. It's like you have many winters every night because it plummets at night, correct? I mean, it gets
Yeah.
down there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like you always have a jacket, kind of in the back of your car someplace, even though when you're baking, after lunch, it's hard to imagine that you would need it. But yes, it does.
Yeah.
It kind of highs and lows for sure.
It's the reason why San Francisco sells so many hoodies. Everybody's like, oh, it's California.
Right.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. And then it's like they realize the truth when they get there, So
Yeah,
it's interesting.
absolutely.
So let's get into how, you're not just somebody that's going into a job, and doing your time and making a paycheck. You're helping people be better leaders. You're obviously, highly driven. How did this start for you? Where were you born and raised, and what were some of the seeds that were planted into you to become who you are and to have the focus professionally that you have now to help others?
Yeah. And I love, I love this kind of question. And often what when I have an opportunity to meet somebody new, because it's so interesting to think about those um, either conscious decision points, unconscious, forks in the road, like those things, those little points in time that kind of led us to where we are today. And this notion that we can kind of script it all out, which as a planner I would love to be able to do, is like put all those little pieces in place, but there's so much opportunity and circumstance that comes into play that kind of leads to where we are. So I was born above the Arctic Circle in Alaska. My parents were from just totally different ends of the spectrum. My dad from Alabama, my mom from California. They were both stationed there. They met, got married, and had me, but we were only there for just a short period of time, like a couple of years. So I had no personal memories of Alaska, but then we were in Nevada, and then, as I said, in Phoenix, Arizona, before we came east with my dad's job. And so kind of moved around a little bit as a kid, but went to high school here in the like DC area, went to college here as well. And I would say like my family was always pretty close, valued travel and kind of experiential learning, which is something that I still value today, and just try stuff. There was a really always encouraged, if you were interested in something, just give it a try, see what it's like. And so I think that's, something that I still not only value, but it's almost kind of like a default now, and something I'm trying to instill in my kids too, is just, if you're curious about it, let's give it a try. Um, and so, yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, I did fine in school, but I really thrived at work. I loved professional environment. I loved going to an office. I loved meetings. I loved the whole thing. I love office supplies, which is, kind of random, but I really loved a professional setting, and just try to you really make the most out of every opportunity that came along, and just being really open to that. But what happened kind of relatively, like within the first 10 years of my career, I kind of slowly been progressing through management positions, kind of mostly like taking on bigger and bigger projects. And about a decade in, I was managing a large team, and I would say under a fair amount of pressure, just from my clients, from just in the environment, and didn't take any conscious action in terms of my leadership. I was just kind of managing by default. And in doing that, my attitude really shifted to be pretty negative towards my team, and ended up really being a pretty terrible manager. And after a couple of months, a year into this, I had a terrible experience where half my team quit on the same day, and I was just absolutely devastated. And really, but that moment catalyzed this idea that if I do nothing else in my career, I want to be a good manager. And so it was really a turning point. It was incredibly shameful. It was humiliating, but it was this moment that I was like, I really have to be more conscious and more intentional about how I lead and how I manage. And so that really changed my trajectory. So the last, so really rebuilt that business, kind of changed my attitude. But then about 5 or 6 years ago, decided that I wanted to take what I had learned and applied in my own setting and start working with other people, both in kind of a training capacity and also a coaching capacity, to help them up their management and leadership as well.
So who's been a role model or somebody that you've looked to kind of become a better leader?
Yeah, so I have a couple. Certainly, I've been so fortunate to work for a number of really good leaders. So just kind of personal one-on-one relationships and with mentors that I've had. There's other people I look to, kind of more of a taking kind of a little bit from a lot of other sources. Like people like Seth Godin is somebody that I really have just been devoted to. He's kind of more known for his marketing, but I think he has this perspective that can apply to, regardless of what the discipline is. And it's really kindness. It's trying to see strengths and see the best in people, and just staying focused on what matters. So people like that. I also I really like Adam Grant's work. And just a number of other people out there that I really enjoy and follow.
So there's always that business success story out there. I mean, we look at Jeff Bezos, and he was just this guy that marketed books, or there's that story about FedEx, and the owner went and gambled in Vegas and made enough money to keep the company going. He thought he was going to go bankrupt. There's all these things that we see. What's been one of your best favorite business success stories that have happened in the American kind of nomenclature that we live through?
Yeah, let me think about that for a moment. So as I'm kind of thinking about it, is there one, like, what's one that comes to mind for you? Like, is there a specific type of business that you're drawn to, or a certain kind of person that you admire?
I am always fascinated at how big someone like a Steve Jobs gets, and what the moment was where they turned the corner. Like, I used to run, like I said, a computer lab, and we got like 12 iMacs at one point, and we had gateways, and Dell was big, and PCs and Windows was king. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with these things. And then all of a sudden the iPod came out, and then it was like, bam, like there was a whole new thing that Apple was doing. And the fact that, because him and Wozniak developed this thing that was really solid and had a lot of momentum, and then he gets kicked off the board that he hired fired him. He goes through this whole rigmarole, up and
Yeah.
down. Phoenix is rising, Phoenix is buried. And finally, he gets to this point where he comes up with this portable music player that turns into a phone, that turns into an iPad. And even along those paths, I remember when the iPad came out, and I've been in technology for a long time. Everybody was like, what a weird name, and what a weird big thing. Why do we need this? What's the story? And it's become the biggest tech device ever. And it's like, there's a level, I think, of that I look at where it's like, it's even like that Air movie that came out about the Michael Jordan shoes. Phil Knight, they're all about, let's just fail, not on purpose, but if we do, okay, whatever. And they're talking about money that most people will never make in their lives. Most people will
Yeah.
never take those risks. So those things to me are fascinating, because I find it akin to jumping out of an airplane without a parachute and hoping that it all works out, you know,
Yeah.
or a parachute that's 30 years old and you're going to do it anyway. Those are the kinds of people that do that. you know,
Yeah.
whereas the rest of the people, most of the people are like, yeah, I'm just going to watch it on the couch, you know, I'm just going to watch Evil Knievel jump over 50 trucks. I'm not into it, you know, but
Right.
those are the people that do it. And it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I love that. I love that example. And I think there's a couple of things I love in your example is that one, that it's just, kind of going back to the idea of like, let's just try stuff, like,
Yeah.
and just see what works. But embedded in that is this persistence, like a certain amount of resilience that like, no matter how much failure, we're just going to get up and keep trying. And I kind of feel like, at least, in my own life and in my coaching practice, I feel like that's where a lot of people get stuck, is that they'll try something, it'll get hard, and they'll, feel like they're not clear about how to work through that barrier, or something will just fall flat, or just not have the return that they expected, and they stop. And in the example you're talking about, it's just like, okay, what's next? Let's try it. I had one idea, I'm going to have, and this belief that like, it's not just one good idea, but there's hundreds of good ideas, and you just keep at it and just keep trying. So I love that in that example. There's a podcast in addition to the on Jazz, but there's another podcast that I really enjoy, How I Built This, with Guy
Yeah.
Raz, and it's all
Oh,
these
yeah.
stories.
Mm-hmm.
It's stories exactly like what you're talking about, where it's like we put. I think when we think about businesses at that scale, you imagine these like superhumans running them, but it's just, they're regular people who had an idea, had some belief in themselves, maybe had a little capital to play with, but like just never gave up. So there's a number a number of people that he features on that podcast that I find just so inspiring, like Bobby Brown, who built, she just always loved playing with makeup, and kind of
Oh,
built this
yeah.
empire, built that business, sold it, and now she's at it again. It's just
Mhm.
like she can't even help herself. So yeah.
I was interviewing somebody, his name's Dr. Disneyland, and he's the Disney expert, and he goes to the parks and all of this. So here in Kansas City, the first place that Walt Disney had a studio was in downtown Kansas City, and it's a building that has a big mural on the side of it. Well, he went bankrupt there and left from our Union Station to go to Florida. And I always thought they should turn something here into that, because he grew up in Marceline, which is about a couple hours from here. But anyways, I was thinking about that idea. He failed and went bankrupt like 2 or 3 times before he left, and finally had this idea. I guess he took his girls to a park on Saturday and wanted to have this place where everybody felt good and could, ride a merry-go-round and all of those other things. But he did the same kind of thing. It just didn't work out, but he still kept at it. So there's something about tenacity and staying in there. And a lot of people don't have that, which is why there's very few people that exist that have that kind of moxie.
Right, right,
So
right.
it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it is so interesting. And so when we think about like, when you look at your kids, I look at my kids. I mean, like if there was any one, gift, I think that, that I could at least give my kids, it would be that just willingness to kind of keep up, keep going,
Yeah,
keep trying. And, and I think it's okay to, be down and have, it's absolutely okay to have setbacks. It's absolutely okay to feel kind of down and disappointed about that, but not to the point where you stop.
yeah.
So, yeah. So just, yeah, always encouraging them to keep going as hard as it can get.
Sure. So in your life, your professional life, what are you the proudest of?
I think it would go back to that one story, is that turnaround really that I was able to make with my team. I feel like I was facilitating a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and somebody piped up and he said, we have a no jerk policy. We don't hire jerks here. And I'm like, I love it. It was like it was a kind of cute little takeaway statement. But I thought for a minute, I'm like, I was a jerk. And I believe now that jerks can absolutely change their ways. I think, unfortunately for me, it took a pretty dramatic event to kind of make that top of my priority list, but it can absolutely happen. And so you can change your mindset, you can rebuild your relationships with people, you can repair them and really turn things around. And so I am very proud of absolutely, turning my attitude around and kind of rebuilding that team into something that, those are people that I'm still friends with today, and have, close professional bonds with.
So that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is this. If you have a dream tonight, you run into the 20-year-old version of yourself. And based on the wisdom that you've gained in this life up to this point, what advice would you give your young version?
aside from like buy real estate.
Yeah, right. Those things, yes.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm like, gosh, if I could just go back in time and buy all that. Anyway.
Yeah, right.
Um, so, I think it would be that it's going to work out. I think early on, I was so worried that that I had to control things, or work so hard on something to make something happen. And I didn't always have faith that things were going to work out. That if in general your heart and your intentions are in the right place, and you show up and do the work and you keep trying, like, things work out. And to not be so maybe obsessive about like exactly what that picture would look like, or or that it wasn't going to happen. It's just having some faith that things were going to work out. Just relax a little bit.
Right. And
Yeah.
would your young version have listened to you?
Oh, no, I'm sure she would not.
Because we had it all figured out. Youth
Oh,
is
yeah.
it's the best drug. It's like, we got it. We're good.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Um, so everyone out there has a perception of you. We have all these pockets of people that exist in our world, from family to friends, colleagues, clients, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm somebody who cares a lot. My relationships are the absolute most important thing to me in my life, both, my close personal relationships as well my professional relationships. I just value those immensely. I care a lot. And because of that, like, I also, like, I want to be helpful. I want to find ways to support people, to encourage them, because I believe so much in them. I believe in myself, but I believe so much in them. And sometimes I think I see possibilities for people that maybe they don't yet see for themselves. And so that really motivates me, I think, to kind of keep interacting with them, keep creating things that are ultimately helpful, and people kind of seeing their potential, and kind of living into this life that we're all so just fortunate to have.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting, as a leadership coach, you have a great story. I mean, it's like you have to learn from the team that left, and to get stronger. And I don't think we recognize that when we're young. We would see that as a catastrophic thing. But I think as you get older, you just have to, that's how you evolve. You have to
Yeah.
do those things. And so if anyone out there wants to hire you, learn more about you, anything related to the world of Robin, where they go?
Yeah. Well, certainly you can come to my website at robincamarote.com. There's lots of kind of free resources there. I also write a weekly column for Inc. Magazine, so you can find just more practical. I try to make things super practical, that actions that people can take away that afternoon and use, not just theory. So you can find me at inc.com/robincamarote. But I would love to hear from anyone out there. Just reach out via email or via LinkedIn, and I'd love to chat.
Excellent. This has been great. I think we really kind of flew over the landscape and got some things figured out. So it's great.
Yes. Thank you, Joe. You are amazing. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
doing this. Is so fun.
Oh, yeah, absolutely it was. Yeah. Thank you, Robin. Have a great day.
Okay.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Thanks.
See you later.